Assalamualaikum. Okay, today we are going to look at the topic, a few topics in our public speaking class, that is supporting your ideas, and then organizing the body of the speech, as well as beginning and ending the speech. Okay, these three topics are important for you to help you in your future presentations, that is for the persuasive presentations, because persuasive presentation is more informative and is more factual in nature, where you need to do some research, such as library research. You need to gather some information from other sources and from other materials. So these three topics will help you to prepare for your persuasive presentations later in your public speaking class. Okay, before you start your presentation, of course, like I have mentioned many times in our public speaking class, where you need to do some preparations in order for you to go for the presentations. And this preparation is important because you have to make sure you can be one of the best speaker, and whatever the content of the presentation that you deliver is mostly effective. Okay, the first part of my lecture today is on supporting your ideas. So when you want to present, of course, you need to prepare your scripts. And in preparing your scripts, you have to give some information that you should get from other materials as well, as like, like internet sources, books, magazines, newspapers, and other sources. So these sources, this information that you gather from different kinds of sources are important for you to be as supportive materials. Okay, and supportive materials can be like examples, statistics, and testimony. And why these three things are important? Because in persuasive presentation, you need to persuade your audience, and in order for you to convince your audience, you must have the supporting materials. Okay, and they are like examples, statistics, as well as testimony. Okay, what are examples? Example refers to specific case to illustrate our idea as a speaker. And there are different types of examples, like brief, extended, as well as hypothetical. Okay, and there are tips for us in using examples. So what are the tips? First, we have to clarify our ideas. So we have to make clear that these are the things or the points that we want to share with our audience. And we have to reinforce as well as personalize the ideas. So we have to make specific points that these ideas are important and these ideas are meant for your arguments. Then you have to make examples very vivid, richly textured. Vivid means clear. It's very detailed, very clear, and this is how you can convince your idea. So your examples usually, even though they are meant to support your main arguments, your materials that you have for the presentations, but still, if you can provide very vivid examples, it can be very strong argument for you to convince and to persuade your audience, so that they will believe on whatever you present. Okay, if you want to provide your supporting ideas with statistics, okay, for example, you present on when we talk about persuasive presentation, okay, you present on, let's say, marriage during young marriage at young age. Marriage at young age is more convenient, or marriage at young age is better than marriage at an old age, for example. Okay, that is one example of persuasive presentation topic. And one of your sorry, I want to change the topic. Okay, the topic is marriage at a young age is marriage at young age has more negative consequences than marriage at a later age. So one of your points should be marriage at young age contributes to more divorce statistics or divorce cases. So you need to provide some statistics in order for you to support this argument. And when you want to use statistics as your supporting materials, you have to make sure that the statistics are taken from reliable sources. Okay, what is meant by reliable sources? It means that you are not simply taking statistics from unknown sources. You have to make sure the statistics on divorce cases among young couples are valid and taken from a reliable source like Jabatan Kebajikan Masyarakat, like for example Jabatan Agama Islam, state religious council, and for example it is taken from any prime newspapers where they also took the statistic from reliable and valid sources. Then you have to quantify the ideas, because when we talk about statistics, there is very quantity in nature, and there are lots of numbers. So you have to make it clear that these statistics is referring to divorce cases among young couples where it shows that about 70% of blah 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 blah. So this is how you explain or quantify your ideas. You have to make your ideas also in numbers so that audience can relate with the statistics. And of course you need to identify sources from where you get the statistics from. Okay, during the presentations, if you have statistics as your supporting materials, you need to explain thoroughly. So my advice is, if you want to use statistics to support your argument, you have to make sure you yourself in the very beginning understand well what the statistics explains, so that it will be much easier for you to give thorough explanation to your audience. And then round off complicated statistics. If you encounter any parts of the statistic that looks more complicated, you have to clear them off first before you present to your audience, because it is afraid you might get questions from the audience that are related to the statistic which you are unable to answer. And if possible, you may need to use other visual aids to support the statistics that you present to the audience. Okay? Alright, another supporting material that you may use to support your arguments in persuasive presentation is by using testimony. Okay, testimony is referring to quotations or paraphrases used by or spoken by someone in order to support our points. Okay, and there are two different types of testimonies. One is the expert testimony, and the second one is peer testimony. Expert testimony refers to a testimony from people who are recognized as expert in their field. Okay, for example, you are presenting on marriage among young couples has more bad consequences or negative consequences as compared to married among couples of a later age, and you want to support your argument saying your first argument that marriage among young couples contribute to more divorce cases, for example. Okay, so you can have a testimony from the expert where you need to get the opinion from let's say a spokesperson from Majlis Agama Islam, or maybe a spokesperson from Jabatan Kebajikan Masyarakat. So they are the ones who can give good testimony, because they are the ones who involved directly in the topic that you are presenting. Okay, besides direct quotation, you can also paraphrase whatever statements made by the testimony. So paraphrase is when you restate the source ideas using your own words. So for this time, you don't have to make direct quotation, but make sure that you rephrase well and do not leave any important ideas, because when you rephrase, you have to make sure the idea is exactly the same like the one that is in original. Okay, and remember, when you rephrase, you don't have to make quotation, you have to cite. You need to make citation even during the presentation. You have to cite the sources orally or verbally by giving the name of the document, who is the author or who is the speaker, the testimony, him or herself, and then from which organization, and maybe qualification, and when, what was the date when he mentioned or he gave this testimony. Okay, so we are done for supporting your ideas. Now we move to the next topic, that is organizing the body of the speech. Okay, once you have gathered all the information needed for your presentation, so you need to now to make it in written. You have to arrange the points that you have with the supporting materials previously in or on a piece of paper. So this is what we call is organizing the body of the presentation. So how are you going to arrange your points? First, you have to keep your points separate. You have to know which point is more important, which point should be placed the first, which point should be number 2, and which point should be number 3, and so on. And how are you going to arrange this? Basically, what the tips that I give to my students is, you need to arrange the points following its importance. So the most important point should be the first point, followed by second one that you believe is important, and then followed by the least important, and so on. So in between these points, you have to insert the supporting materials that we have discussed just now. Okay, so that's the first thing. The number 2 is try to use same patterns of wording, because you need to show the cohesiveness of every single point that you present. So you have to use the same pattern of wording. If not, it will be so jumbled up, unstructured, and not cohesive. And then balance time devoted to each. So make sure, even though the first point is most important, but you cannot highlight the first point more or outnumber than the rest of other points. So you have to make sure when you present, each of the point is given balanced time for you to explain. All right. So what we can see in brief, the points that you arrange must be in chronological order. Okay, list of importance just now. All right. sometimes you need also to arrange your points based on topics. So when you want to arrange the points based on topics, you don't have to identify or determine which topic is more important than which topic. Okay, basically you will have to pick the topic that you think mostly need to be exposed first, followed by the second one and the third one, and so on. That is based on the topics. Okay, for example, you want to present on journalism, aspects of journalism. Okay, so in journalism there are several topics that you need to cover, and each topic you have to have the supporting materials. So how are you going to arrange these topics? So you arrange based on what you got from the sources. That's it. Okay, you don't have to think about which topic is more important than which topic. It's not that way. Okay, then we move to the next one, beginning and ending the speech. How are you going to, okay, you have arranged the topics, you have make little scripts for you, because this is just oral presentation. You don't have to have you know, the written report like you submit the assignment. But in presentation, you need to have, you still have some notes, but as a guidance only, and they should be arranged in point forms, because it will be easier for you to see which one that you want to say first, which one that you want to say second, and so on and so on. So before you begin, so these are the things that you need to do. How are you going to introduce your presentation? Okay, before you begin your presentation, even though most important is the body of the presentation, what are you going to share with your audience, but still the introductory part of your presentation is as important as the body as well as the ending of your presentation, because we are talking about public speaking. Okay, for the introduction, first thing, of course, you need to get attention from the audience. So this is what we call as attention getter. So you need to get the attention of the audience first. How? You have to show the interest in the topic, and then you have to alert the audience that, okay, this is what I'm going to talk about. So you need to reveal the topic during the introductory part of the presentation. So you have to establish the credibility of yourself as a speaker. I have all the good knowledge and I have sufficient knowledge about this topic. And you have to give your audience in the introductory part of your presentation some preview about the topic of your speech. Okay, what am I going to talk about? Okay, how are you going to gain the attention of the topic? Remember that persuasive presentation is not like demonstrative presentation. Demonstrative presentation, you have all the items that you want to show to the audience, and this will, in the first place, make the audience pay attention, because they want to see what are you going to do with those items in front of you. But for the persuasive presentations, you need to have just facts, statements, testimony to support your arguments. So how are you going to gain attention with a persuasive presentation? First, you need to relate the topic to the audience. Remember we learned about situational audience analysis, how much you need to analyze the audience so that they can appreciate the topic that you are presenting. So you need to relate the topic to the audience. You have to state the importance of the topic, why this topic must be presented today, why you are so much interested in presenting this topic. And you also have to surprise the audience. How are you going to surprise? That's your creativity. Okay, arouse curiosity. So you have to create some sense of curiosity within the audience. Oh, we want to know more about this topic, for example. Okay, so basically, how are you going to get attention from the audience? Maybe you can start with asking questions. Okay, you can start with asking the audience question that relates to your topic. Or you can also begin with a quotation by some scholars, by famous people that may relate to the topic. Or the last part, maybe you can get attention by your audience, from your audience, by telling a story. Okay, let's say I give you example again, the same example. Marriage among young couples has more bad consequences. Then you may begin your presentations by telling a story of one divorce case of young couples. Okay, so you have to show your credibility as a speaker. You have to show, or you have to make sure that the audience have very good perception about you as a speaker, how much you can talk about this. Okay, and then goodwill, perception of whether a speaker has best interest of audience in mind, whether you really care about your audience or not. So you have to show that. Okay, preview statement. So like I said before, you need to make some preview of the body of your speech, where you have to give a statement in introduction that shows main points that you are going to talk about in your presentation. So in preparing the introduction, you have to be very concise. Okay, you have to look for materials that you can have during the introduction part of the presentation. I can see many of my students, before when they present, they don't really pay attention on the introductory part of the presentation. And this is wrong, because introduction contributes 30% of the whole presentation. So if you begin with very good presentation, inshallah, your presentation will be lively and audience will love to listen to your presentation. But if you begin with something boring, then this will affect the rest of your presentation. So basically, you need to be very, very creative in getting attention from the audience, even from the very beginning. Okay, how are we going, even though it is called introductory part of the presentation, introduction, but actually the best tip for you to do your or to prepare your introduction is after you have completed the body of your speech. Only then you can go back to the introduction and produce very outstanding introduction. Because remember, I told you in the introduction, you must preview or give some preview of your speech body. Okay? Okay, so after you have produced very outstanding presentation, began with good introduction, then you have your body speech, okay, point 1, point 2, point 3, and then you need to have one point where what other people that is against your topic say, and what is your rebuttal points. Okay, I will explain this further in our tutorial class. Then we move to the conclusion part. Okay, you have done the introduction, the body, and now we move to the conclusion, the ending of your speech. Okay, how are you going to come up with your conclusion? Even though it's just conclusion, do not just end your presentation, okay, thank you, assalamualaikum. Okay, you have to wrap up with a very good statement that will make your audience remember your presentation the whole of their life. So you have to make a signal that this is going to be the ending of my presentation. All right, and you have to reinforce again the central idea, what is your presentation is all about. So you have to go back to the body, and then you have to gather them again, rephrase in a very short sentence, clear, that shows the audience, okay, this is what I have presented. Okay? There are different types of ending actually. Either you dissolve your ending by generating emotional appeal, by fading to dramatic final statement. Okay, you make very dramatic final statement. Or maybe you reinforce the central ideas where you need to summarize your speech and with another quotation maybe, or make a dramatic statement also. So in preparing the conclusion, still you have to, whatever it is, even though it is called the body part of the speech, but the body part of the speech is actually the central idea that will help you to come up with very good introduction as well as very good ending. So make sure you have first the body part of your presentation well prepared. Only then you can come up with very good introduction to attract your audience and very good closing of your presentation that will make your audience feel so satisfied. I have watched and listened to a remarkable presentation ever. Okay, so conclusion should be actually very brief because it consists of about 20% of the presentation, and you need to work out well with the content of the body that been rephrased in your or restate again in your conclusion. Okay, I think that's it for today. Thank you. Assalamualaikum.